So, like, did you find that you really needed all of the stuff that you brought with you?
Oh, no. No, frankly, brought way too many pairs of pants. That's the first one.
Hey, welcome to Expat Diaries podcast. And today we are so excited to have Gabriel with us. I meet people on these different forums and I go, hey, I would love to have a podcast guest. And then we get on a call and we chit chat and we kind of determine it. It took Gabriel and I just a little bit to connect. But once we did, I was so glad we did because there's so much value that he brings to this experience of becoming an expat and moving here. And then what he offers to the rest of the expat community. There's just so much value there. So without further ado, Gabriel, hello. I'm so glad you're here. And I know that kindred spirits, people who love the country, literally are like my favorite people in the world. And my husband and my business partner, they get like, they laugh at me all the time because like, I fall in love with every guest we have. And I'll like leave here and go, oh my God, you're not going to believe the person I talked to today. It was like, so great. It was blah, blah, blah. They're like, everybody, you said about everybody. I'm like, I know, they're all so interesting. So I know that you are in OHL and you are from Quebec, but bring me up to speed. Like what made that big quantum leap in your mind when you said, hey, I think we should move to Costa Rica?
It's first, thank you for the invite. I mean, it did take us a little time to connect, but once we did, really happy that we did. Same. And I love these. I mean, to be frank, just like yourself, I tell that I literally to my wife all the time. Oh, I met this person and she's so amazing and this and that. And I mean, there's just a gathering of people in Costa Rica that the meshing just makes it so easy and people are just so friendly as well. So that's one part. But the second part, it's always, I call it the $1 million question, right? So what brought you here? It was a mixture of a whole bunch of things. I mean, in Quebec, it's cold during the winter time. We had more than enough of the coldness of the winter. COVID hit, let's be frank. I have 3 young boys. At the time, my youngest was pretty much a newborn, more or less. Cooped up 2 winters with the 3 young boys, 3 energetic young boys. It was just too much for us. So, my wife and myself, we started looking. I'm one of the lucky ones where, I work behind a computer. So I figured, let's just see what's out there. And then my wife started Googling. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think what she Googled was something hot and free, if they have like some sort of freedom or something. Lucky we didn't fall on a, not so good site. But, the reality is
for sure that could have gone
just
really
in
bad.
case. So we ended up falling on, Costa Rica popped up at the top of the list, and we're like, you know what, we heard a lot of things about Costa Rica. We had never been ever, so connected with a bunch of friends that had actually been here before, also connected with people that were here in the different regions in Costa Rica to realize that, at a high level it looks like it fits. So I don't suggest this to everybody, but if you have it in your mindset, and for us, it wasn't plan A, plan B. It was plan A, period. Right. So we sold everything in Canada, got rid of all their stuff. I think my wife was number 1 on Marketplace for like 3 or 4 weeks. It was crazy, the amount of people that were popping by our house. But then, we 15 big suitcases, 10 small ones, jumped on the plane, 3 young boys. And then when we landed, we've always been in the OHL region, so South Pacific area. And for us, it was, as of day 1, it was a little hard, of course, for the first couple of weeks, but really quickly started meshing with the communities. I mean, at this time, we've been here for almost 3 years, and my boys, they speak 3 languages. My wife does as well. We mesh in the communities, got a couple businesses here, and it's the friendliness and the vibe and what you can find here is I have the word in French, but is unequal. You can't find it anywhere else. I mean, It's just crazy amazing. So
tell me about this. So like, did you find that you really needed all of the stuff that you brought with you?
Oh, no. Frankly, brought way too many pairs of pants. That's the first one. That's what I keep telling people. Too many sweaters. We always think, what if? I mean, if you're going to San Jose, bring yourself 1 sweater, 1 pair of pants, and you're good. Yeah. But jokes aside, I mean, it's always, we've done a couple back and forths just because there was a couple of things, we both really love our coffees in the morning. So we had brought down a small machine. We had brought, the second time we came back, brought back a better like espresso machine. So things like that we like to have our little comforts that we're used to in Canada and the States. But in reality, probably 50% of what we brought was you know, it is not something that we would have brought a second time if we would have known beforehand.
Right. And I think I see that with people a lot. Like, I have an interview that's coming up. Well, I've already interviewed, but I have a podcast recording with this woman and her husband and their 5 kids, and they came with 32 totes.
Oh yeah.
Not to mention the suitcases. They had Rubbermaid totes, 32 of them. So they had a gentleman with a big box truck meet them at the airport so they could load all of that stuff up. I'm like, holy cow. But I'm sure that, you know, when you're uprooting 5 kids, that even though it may not be anything that they ever mess with again, the fact that they had some control over what they got to bring from home. And then if it made them feel safer in this transition, then I get it. But I'm sure that they're going to find too that, you know, like the 32 totes that are in my garage right now, if I haven't opened them in a year, I don't even want to open them now because like, I don't want to go in there and then revisit. Do I think I need this? I haven't needed it for a year. Probably a good chance I don't. Okay. So tell me what you did in Quebec before you came down here, and then how has that transitioned over?
Yeah, good question. I've been in the lending space for quite a long time. So mainly private lending up in Canada, family run business, been in it for, you know, probably 20, 25 years. I've been in it for, time flies. So probably 8, 9, 10 years, let's say 10 years ish. And then moving down here, saw the opportunity. So for me, it was an easy transition in, you know, the knowledge I have and bringing it down here. So the reality is that I do have a private lending business here. It's in very specific cases because at the end of the day, I also have a development business in the area, mainly Uvita, Ohochal, south of Ohochal towards Palmar. So that's where my partner and myself, we mainly dabbled in, as I like to say. And the up and coming company, which has actually been in existence for more or less 18 months to 24 months now, is CCS, which is an ecosystem of services that is around the expats, but mainly in the lending space. So
I'm super excited about this topic. I'm super excited about this topic because like you brought something to Costa Rica that really wasn't there before. Like the landscape. And so people want to go, oh, you guys want to come here and change the environment. But no, but there are some things that are needed in Costa Rica that maybe didn't exist. And so I believe when we spoke, like you were one of the first people to actually figure out a way to do a mortgage, right?
Correct. It's the, you know, I like to call it, you know, people call it disruptor, pioneers, and so on and so forth. Right. The reality is that we pioneered the mortgage brokering. I just like to put it in tags, mortgage brokering space, because the reality is that it's, the banks have been lending to expats for quite a while. So let's go back 5 years. They did, but the process is even today is still pretty gruesome, just to put it in simple terms. So the reality is that we did. 24 months ago, I was asked, and I was sick and tired of people asking me and not finding the proper solutions. So just to segue real quick, I often tell people, you know, coming to Costa Rica is like going back into the 80s.
Yes.
So the reality is that if you have the idea and you're willing to jump through those 7,200 hoops, which you will have those 7,200 hoops, the reality it's either one of two things. So you're either the only one doing it, or you're the only one doing it legally, because there's a lot of, you know, mortgage brokers out there, just like the realtors and everything that gets mixed into it. So it becomes very difficult to navigate it all. But for us, it was very simple. It's streamlined, fintech, online, uploading documents, kind of like what Americans are used to, right. Americans and North Americans. I mean, it's just because the banks don't think that way. And then what happens is that everything just ends up being complicated because it's still very paper pen.
Right. And so one of the things that we spoke about too was so the process for the Costa Ricans and when they're going through a mortgage process, right? And that they don't ever look at the next thing until it's the next thing, like, right? Like they're not going to ask you for the next thing that they need until this thing is done. Instead of like, hey, here's a bunch of stuff. Let's start getting it ready. Let's start getting all of this stuff ready for the date that we need to. Because I worked in mortgage for over a decade in the States. And like, I knew, even though there may be some subsequent things that would pop up that were outside of the norm, I knew what the norm was. Here's all of the things that we're going to need. There's no deviant. As a matter of fact, I had a thing that's called a one-sheeter because it was always needed on every loan. And so I just printed it up. And every time I would meet somebody, I would go, here's your running paper. Start with this. Here's what we're going to need to begin with. And then there will be some other things. This is not the end, but this is your running place right here. And I think that process, having that process of knowing what's coming up, and even for like, let's say if I were American that was doing that, and there may be some documents that I need from the US for this transaction, right?
Mhm.
And so that takes time. Isn't it better if your clients know ahead of time, you're going to start working on this process?
Correct. That's you literally pinpointed, Robin. The reality is that they're being paper pen and being slightly, I'll call it archaic. That's the reality. It's that the biggest issue is, like you said, there's a checklist of, let's just call it 50 points. The 50 points in the checklist, maybe point 2, 10, 15, 25, and 32 are going to be the exact same document.
Mhm.
But for the people in the banks here, and this is regardless of the bank, by the way, it's always going to be, oh, we're at point 2. I need this document. And then they get to point 10. Oh, I need this document. Yeah, but you already have that document. No, but I need a new one. But why? It's the same one. So it becomes really frustrating and complicated. And at the end of the day, it's not just aggravating, because the second biggest issue is the communication that
Right.
most of the banks do not have. Hence the reason that on our end, it's very simple, because we have the timeline, we have the process. We've passed many, many clients over the last 2 years with the different banks to realize that. So just like you said, Robin, the reality, Mr. Client, Mr. ABC, this is what you're going to need. This is how it's going to happen. And of course, there's certain factors that we don't control. The client tells us, I have, and it's happened in the past. No, I don't have any problems with insurance. And then the client actually lied to us. And we got towards the end of the transaction and he couldn't get insurance because, he actually has a criminal record.
Mm.
So, it's not advantageous to anybody to lie to us, because at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to suffer in it.
Right. For
So
sure.
that's where we come in, where we facilitate the process. Hence the reason that we call ourselves facilitators, is because we're going to handhold you from the beginning till the end. And we can give you, whether you call it a one-pager, a cheat sheet, whatever it is, we can give you the proper timeline and an approximate, because, there's always holidays, somebody falls sick, something happened, and so on and so forth, right?
Right.
So,
And so then what does that process look like? Because I think this isn't talked about enough on any forums anywhere. Is like, so if I wanted to purchase a piece of property, what is the best case scenario? Like, am I bringing 50% to the table to purchase it? If it were vacant land, is that different? Can you get a mortgage on vacant land? So tell me, like, what are some of the guidelines?
yeah, it's a good question. I'll just take a mini step back just to make sure, because if a client wants to get a bank-backed mortgage, whether it's a construction, whether it's a refinancing, whether it's just a regular mortgage, we can definitely help facilitate that.
Okay.
With different banks, whether it's Banque de Vivienda, La Fise, credit unions like Desifin, Comeka, and so on. So
Mhm.
those are some of the partners that we work with. Or since we are, once again, an ecosystem, we have other programs, which, a client might need a private loan. Why? Because he's just at the end of his build, he needs an extra $100,000, and then he just wants to finish his build to put it on the market, and that's it.
Nice.
So we have those options as well. And the last programs, I call it the use of retirement funds. So we have a partner in the States in Florida for the 401ks, and we have another partner based in Toronto, which is going to be for the RRSPs, which is the equivalent in Canada. And we can help facilitate. So sometimes we need to get a little creative, and we might use the client's RRSPs or 401ks for cash down purposes, and then we get a mortgage with the bank to cover the rest. So we definitely have a bunch of different programs that can help achieve the end goal. So that's number one. Number two, the process. It's 99% of the flow is going to be the same. So the client's going to reach out, and we're going to have a discovery call. We're going to go through what the objectives are, because once again, the client sometimes thinks he wants to get a mortgage, but the reality is not going to work, because, as an example, the client is from South Africa and he doesn't have a credit score. So if that's the case, then we have to go down a very specific path. Why? Because not all banks are going to accept it, and the ones that do are pretty rare. Whereas we're going to have, example, Europeans, which is similar, meaning that if we have clients from Spain, it's not so bad, because some of our banking partners here have an office in Spain, whereas some of them don't. So once again, it depends, and it goes case by case when it comes to that. Following the discovery call, we're gonna know exactly which avenue we're going to be going down. Sometimes going to be one, sometimes going to be multiple, depending on the client. And then from there, we're just going to get a quick and easy pre-approval. And once again, I want to make sure that this is super clear, because a pre-approval doesn't mean anything. I mean, I get this all the time. Gab, I have the Scotiabank that gave me this pre-approval, and they're guaranteeing us an 80% LTV. My friends, I've been doing this for 2 years. I have never seen an LTV of 80% in the country. No, never. So they're going to throw a bunch of powder in your eyes, and then they're going to tell you, oh, yes, yes, yes. But as you're going down the process, or actually when you're going down the process, the reality is that you're going to get to a certain step, and then the bank already has a hold on you. So the reality is that then you're caught, because, I have to spend X amount of dollars, and I might as well. I got my hand in the system already, right? So I'm already halfway through or whatever it is. So clients feel obligated at that point in time because there's no other. Well, there is other solutions. It's just because then you're starting over. So it doesn't become very sexy.
Right.
So we get a quick pre-approval, just making sure the project, where it is, what are they looking to achieve, and so on and so forth, with a couple different banks. It's just an easy touch point, and then we can give them, high-level numbers. Let's say it's $100,000, just easy numbers, $100,000 purchase. Okay, you know what? I have 50% cash down. I want to get 50% financed. What are the fees like? How does it work, and so on and so forth. So we can give them general guidelines on that. Once it makes sense, from there, we open up the file. So on our end, we have a file opening fee because we put a lot of work before we actually get to the end. So the file opening fee is going to help us move forward down the pipeline. It's a strike link, super simple, paid by credit card.
Is it like a percentage of the purchase, or is it a flat rate?
It's a flat rate. Usually, it's. I'm not a big fan of mentioning numbers right away, just because we have sometimes a $50,000 mortgage, just like we have a $1.5 million mortgage. But generally speaking, I mean, the opening fee is going to be about $1,000.
Okay, gotcha.
More or less. So at that point, then we're moving down the process, and then we're going to start capturing all the documents. So we have a list of exactly the documents that we need, and then from there, they're uploaded online. So everything for us is done online. You can do the application. You don't even have to talk to any of us if you really don't want to. It could all be done on our website, and then uploading the documents is all done on our website as well. So that's also very easy. It's what North Americans especially are used to. At that point, once we have all the documents, then we're going to send it to the bank. So from there, it's when the official counter starts. So the date counter. At that point, it takes about a week and a half, let's say 2 weeks to be pessimistic, before we get the financials approved, not pre-approved, approved by the banks, depending on which bank we send it to. Sometimes it can be 3-4 days, averaging about a week and a half. And I like to say 2 weeks to be safe. From there, we're going to send the appraisal. So there's going to be an appraiser fee. Going to be generalizing here. Regular property, anything under $700,000 is going to be about $1,000, right? I mean, 900, 1,000, something along those lines. And the appraisal, just to make sure everybody's on the same page as well, can get really tricky because I call it the wild card. Sometimes you're going to have a property that it's on the market for $300,000, but then the appraisal comes around and it's $200,000. So the client is, am I getting screwed over because it's because here there's no MLS. They don't base it off of the same criteria as we're used to in Canada and the States. So we have had some nice surprises where the appraisal comes back higher than the sales price, but they're rare. To be totally honest, they're pretty rare.
So when it comes in low like that, what is that? What are the solutions?
It's more cash down. I mean, we can try. We haven't had much success, but sometimes we can try with a different company, a different appraisal company. But the ones, we've done 50-ish deals in the last 18 months, right? So, I mean, we're pretty good with the companies now, and we know which ones inside of the specific companies are better than the others. So we try to focus on them. But it does happen where, and it's unfortunate in a sense, but the gentleman or the miss might have a bad day, and all of a sudden, they're just really cranky. They do their appraisal real quick, and then it's $50,000 less than what people were thinking. It unfortunately does happen because it's still a little bit. I like that expression where it's like a finger in the wind.
Yeah.
So, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
So once that appraisal comes back, there's not much more we can do. But we just try to work with the percentages. And most of the banks, and this is where it gets tricky, because most of the banks are going to say we can finance up to 70% of that appraisal. Or if the appraisal comes over the sales price, then we can go up to 70% of the sales price. The reality is it's in very rare cases. I've seen probably like a handful, maybe 5 or 6 of them that are going to lend at 70%. The reality is more 65, 60-ish. The bank is trying to cover their butt, as I like to say. So it's mainly going to be that. Put things in perspective, just because we're on the topic right now. The reality, and this is totally blunt, totally honest, the reality is that on the sales price, the bank will finance anywhere between, pessimistically, 35 to 45, realistically, 45 to 60, and optimistically, it's going to be 65, 70% of the sales price. So that gives a really good bracket. And this is including closing costs, right? This is all inclusive, our fee, the bank's fees, so on and so forth, which I'll get to in a sec when we get to the end. But the reality is, if you're aiming for 50%, you won't get disappointed. Right. Why? Because that's what I tell the clients as well.
And then the timeline for that, so let's say, now we've uploaded all the paperwork that we think that we're going to need. The appraisal has come in, and now they're marrying the two together. Do we have a qualified buyer and a qualified property? Then what does it look like? How long does it look like after the appraisal comes in before we have additional conditions or requirements?
The terms and conditions upon the client are given directly following the appraisal. So, example, we got a result today from one of our clients. From there, I'm going to show him the results a little later on this afternoon. Here are the numbers, and then from there we have the actual mortgage like numbers. So you want easy numbers. You want $150,000 mortgage. This is what terms and conditions, the fees, everything is there so that we get the final okay. We get a signature, and then we're able to move on towards closing, which takes about, if we're good, 2 weeks, meaning that if we can get the documents very quickly from the lawyers and blah, 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 or more like 4 weeks is when we're pessimistic.
Okay. And so then let's talk about terms, right? So what is a typical mortgage term in Costa Rica?
Yeah, the amortization is going to be 20 years. We have banks that some of them are just going to come in with a 15-year if the property is going to be a little riskier, let me call it that way. And then I have some, I have this all the time as well, where, my pre-approval with bank ABC came back at 25 years. My friend, that's in the pre-approvals. They're going to give you all the best terms and conditions for sure. Guaranteed, hands down. But that's not going to happen. I've only seen one mortgage that was 25 years, and this is on, 50 plus mortgages. So it's not going to happen. That's number one. Number two, 20 years is going to be the average. 15 if the case is a little riskier, or if the client's age is a little older, as you're heading towards 60, 65, 70, because, for them it's riskier, of course, at that age.
Right.
So that's also a reality. And then the interest rate is going to be right out the gate. It's usually between 8 to 8.5. And then that's going to be for an introductory level. I have seen some banks come in at, 7.5, 7.75, but the clients are super excited. But then after 1 or 2 years, then it becomes prime plus the spread that the banks take.
Okay. So that was a question I was going to ask too. So it's not fixed. That rate is not fixed for 20 years. It's a variable.
There are no banks, and this is like a massive warning, and I'm raising the flag for everybody listening. If a bank tells you we have a fixed rate, run, okay, because it's impossible. There are no banks that do fixed rate. If they do, it's because it's new of the last like week or 2 or 3 maybe.
So then what do those variable rates look like then? We're locked in for how many years before it starts moving?
Yeah, the averaging. So I'm going to be generalizing here, but most banks are going to have an introductory rate for the first year or 2, and then they're going to have a second introductory rate for like a year or 2 again, and then from there it's going to be prime plus the spread. So the spread is generally between 4 and 8%, depending on the bank. Most private banks are going to be towards the lower end, 4.5, okay, and some state-owned banks, Banco Nacional, BAC, Banco Popular, are going to be on the higher, towards the 8-ish%, because their prime rate is much lower. So just there's different prime rates in the country. If ever people want to,
but is that all determined like at closing? Like this is what it will be year 1 through 3, and year 3 through 5 it will be this, and then we will see it be. Then you will be locked in at prime plus 4.5 for the remainder. It's all laid out, so there's like no guesswork is what it's going to be on year 7.
Correct, and then
other than the mobility of prime.
Correct. And then there's always going to be a base rate. So let's say the introductory rate is 8%. Well, in that case, the base rate is going to be 8%. So even if prime goes down to, 2% as an example, well, you're never going to get an interest rate under 8. So what I tell clients, and this is, working in this industry for a while, I'm sure you was the same thing in the States. The reality is, you know what? Take that interest rate right now. In 2, 3, 4 years, if the interest rate really drops, you know what? Just refinance your property.
Correct. Yeah. So, I love it. Okay, let's get back on schedule with you.
So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just to recap the flow. So we start with the discovery call, the pre-approval, and then we get the appraisal, documents, and then appraisal. Sorry. Once we get the appraisal results, then we head towards closing. Like I said, averaging 3 to 4 weeks. If we're really quick, we can close in 2 weeks. So if you put the whole thing together, in reality, it takes about a month and a half to 2 months.
Okay, that's not bad. It's not far off from what we do here in the States either. Like, I mean, if you're hustling and you know what you're doing and it's a good, clean deal, maybe you could get in and out in 30 days, but not realistically. It's not realistic that happens. Okay, so then let's say now I bought my property and I have a mortgage. And then how do you pay it? I mean, I haven't seen a mailbox in Costa Rica. So how does that happen?
Pay, you don't have to pay. No, I'm just kidding. No, depending on the bank you're going to be dealing with, there's two different realities. Most banks are going to open up a bank account at the same time. I mean, the KYCs are already done, so they know your customers. So since the banks will already have 99% of the information, sometimes there's going to be one or two additional documents to sign and so on. They open up a bank account, and then you have to deposit your money in that bank account.
Then they just withdraw it every month when it's due? Okay.
Correct.
That's simple.
Or if you want, and this is in rarer cases, but I've seen it before, clients will make a payment to a cuenta, so to a bank account number that the bank is going to give for their monthly payments, and then they send an email to the person that's responsible for their mortgage, and they tell them, I made the payment, please verify, please confirm, and so on.
Nice.
I find that a messy way just because you never know. Somebody falls sick, something falls between the cracks. It's a little too risky in my book. I prefer having the bank account and, putting 1 or 2 months worth of payments in there and then just, keep adding as the months go by, sure. Especially in Costa Rica. Just keep it simple. I always the KISS system.
Well, I'm going to tell you, this is so eye-opening that all of this knowledge is so profound. I really appreciate all of that. Now let's talk about your developments you're working on.
Yeah. I mean, it's we're in Ojochal. I mean, there's two of us, right? There's two people in this business, and the reality is that my partner, he's the one that deals with all the front end. So he's the designer. He's more like the person in the field, as I like to say. So he's on the construction site. He has a look, and then I'm the finance guy. So I'm the numbers guy. I'm the accounting, the legal, everything that people don't prefer, let's put it that way, don't like. So that's what I handle in the back end. But I mean, our company...
But that's how my business partner and I are too. Like, I get to do all the fun stuff, and she's in charge of the details and the messy stuff that I don't want to deal with. She's in charge of reading contracts because I'm not going to. I'm the visionary. I'm going to go see what's possible out there, and then she's going to make it happen.
Agreed. And I mean, I think I call it the perfect marriage. I have I have my wife and I have my work husband, I guess we could call it. So he's my better half when it comes to that sense. And it just makes it, and to be frank, I mean, and this is general knowledge for everybody, but it's much easier finding like-minded people here to do business with because everybody's in that same, generalizing, of course, mindset. Versus in Canada and the States where people are very wary of their counterparts or their neighbors. And so it's, if you have an open mind and you're open to it and, you attract those types of people.
Exactly.
I mean, there's amazing people here. Amazing. So
you guys your first development was in Ojochal?
Correct. Our first development is in Ojochal. We actually have 3 developments in Ojochal. In different phases. We have some on Tucson Road. We have some up in phase, I always forget the numbers, but phase 5, 6, 7 up there somewhere in Ojochal as well. We have a pretty sizable development in San Buenas as well, close to the golf course. So, I mean, we're definitely in a good place. We build custom builds. I mean, there are no 2 houses that are going to be the same. We don't sell the designs. My partner takes a lot of pride in it. So everybody that's building with us gets a custom built house.
Nice.
So it's to your likings. And, my partner's pretty creative and pretty darn good in design. So
I love
we make nice houses.
I love that. And so then let's talk about so I know that you buy a piece of property and you have to go in and plat it out and you have to decide what size of a lot is going to be available and what's going to look like laying out and get all that infrastructure in there. That seems like a big daunting task.
It's, let me put it let me switch the perspective a little bit. The money, oftentimes we hear this in the real estate space, right? The money is made on the buy. So when you buy, you have to buy with equity, and all the investors, they always say the same thing. Or sometimes because they have a vision, because later down the road, it's going to become something else. So I truly believe that. But when you're in the development space, especially in Costa Rica, you have to go where there's headaches. I mean, the reality is that most people don't want to do what we do. Why? Because we have to go through all those, 7,200 hoops. I was saying a while ago, every project, every lot, every development, it's always the same thing. It won't always be the same problems. It's always going to be the same problems. It's just going to be different problems in different lots, depending on what it is. Whether it's ISE, whether it's ASADA, whether it's bringing the roads, whether it's getting a permit of some sort. Something as simple as, I'm going to move a little dirt around. Yeah, well, if you move more than 200 cubic meters of dirt, then you need a permit. The permit costs $2,000, and if you don't, and you get denounced by somebody, then at that point in time, then you're going to have to pay a permit. You're going to have to pay a fine, and then it just stops your whole development. It just becomes a massive headache. So more often than not, people just try it out and then they learn as they go, which is fine, but you can lose a lot of money. And as much as you can get, some of these developments in San Buenas, if I take an example, that development's been going on for a year and a half. So we haven't seen a penny from that development, and we've put quite a lot of money into it. But we already have 4 lots out of the first 10 that are sold. So as soon as we have all the amenities, so the infrastructure in place, so we're just missing the water. At that point in time, we can actually sell the lots. So that's great. But some of these clients have been waiting for 12 months.
Yeah,
and that's the reality of the land development, and it's something that we don't control. You have to go through all of these steps. So if you're good with problems, if you have a lot of patience, and if you can take it on with a smile on your face, I mean, you're going to be ahead of the curve on many, many fronts.
Yeah, we feel really lucky. The property that we've purchased in Golfito, the gentleman that we purchased it from is actually a developer, and he's developed just a ton of stuff down in the Golfito area. And he's just like, let me just walk you through it. Like, I'm not going to charge you to do this thing. I really want somebody who's going to bring a vision to Golfito that will be tourism. It'll be, let's bring some more things here. And so he's like, he even told me, he's like, because I said, I think we have to get that well in place first, because we can borrow water. He'll give us a water grant from him, Gravity, for a while, but it's not going to be enough to suit for the time being. So we know we're going to have to get a well. And he goes, okay, when we get to the well, let me do it, because there's a Tico price and there's a Gringo price. And just let me go and arrange all of it. And I'm like, not a problem. I have no pride in this whatsoever. You want to save me $10,000? Go right ahead. I'll be so happy for that. So he's been very open and generous with, you can go try to do it if you want to, but it's going to look like this. And I'm like, thank you. Just give me the guidance and I'll be fine with that. And he's become a trusted friend. So I love that. Because I don't know that people know, so I went to Mexico. I used to go to Mexico a lot. And I always felt, even when I would go to Mexico and, when you go and you're a tourist and you're wanting to buy something, and the bartering thing is a thing, right? They love to barter back and forth. They love to tell you, they want to wait till you're walking out the door and they're like, Senora, come back. Blah, 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 blah. They want to holler back at you because they want to do this whole thing, right? And then they're just jabbering with each other in Spanish, and you know that you're getting screwed, but you don't care. You're giving them the money anyways, right? And so I never feel like that. I always feel shady when I'm in Mexico doing a deal, but I never feel like that in Costa Rica. And I'm sure there's some shade there also, but I feel bad because sometimes I come in with that skepticism when I'm discussing business with somebody in Costa Rica, and it's just a habit from being in the US or being in Mexico and having to have those kind of guarded conversations. And I've found with Marvin, like when we're talking, like he's just like, let's talk about what you want to do. I think that this is your next step to do this thing. And he's very open. And we've talked to several people over the last 10 years about our purchasing and what we were going to do down there. And this is like the first time I felt like we had, a comrade as such. That's a Tico that has lived in Golfito his whole life and knows the municipality, and his wife is a judge and all of the things, right? He knows all of the ins and outs of it. So I think that building that community whenever you come down and finding and asking like, who should I talk to? Who would be a good trusted advisor? And finding those people that'll walk you through it, I think is super powerful.
I 100% agree. And the reality is, most people come here with their high horses. I'm from the States or Canada or Europe, and I know how to build. I know to do that. Yeah, you do, but you don't know here. And here, one of the first things I realized was, well, the first 2 things. The first one was never barter on their salary. Never. Why? Because it's a question of pride at the same time. But on the flip side, when you think about it, the average salary is what, $1,000, $1,100 a month.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you stop and think about it, you're bartering on somebody who's making $1,000 a month. I mean, why? And even if they have their business, and yes, they're going to get gringoed, and yes, they're going to be paying a little more, and etc. But that's number one. And number 2, just like the lawyers, I had to pass through 3 or 4 different lawyers before I found a good one. Right. And now I have 2 different companies that I'm using, and all in all, I probably used up like 6 or 7 of them. Yeah. Some of them were great, just not good with what we needed, or so on and so forth.
I agree.
Or they weren't necessarily creative like we wanted or needed them to be, or so on and so forth. Good people. It's not because they weren't good people. And that's the thing. Here, you're going to have, there's 2 sides to the coin. So you're going to have the people that are going to be shady. And regardless of whatever you're going to do, you're still going to get screwed. That's regardless. But on the flip side, you're going to have good people and they're going to want to help and you're going to see it and you're going to feel it very, very quickly. And that's where a lot of the times, the shady people are the ones that they just want the short-term gain. So they're going to charge you $400 when technically it should be 200 because they need that money and you have to put yourself in their shoes as well. I have quite a few employees here as well. And the reality is that if you're making $1,000 a month, some of the people, they just, they're making 800 or they have $1,200 worth of payments. They're making 1,000 where, they got to figure out how to get that extra $200 gap.
Yeah.
So is it right? You know what? That's not for me to judge. I'm not here. I don't judge people on that. People do what they need to do. But the reality is that's what's going to happen on the short term versus you have other people that are going to think about the long term. You know what? I'm going to charge this person $200. Why? Because I think we can do business for the next 5 years.
Right.
So those are the type of people you want to find as much as you can. And then, people that have been implemented here for X amount of years, they usually, going to be generalizing, they usually win through the hardships of filtering those people out and, finding the good ones.
Yeah. It's funny as I was visiting with, I don't know if you know, Melissa Garita. She's an attorney. And one of the things that she had said too, she's like, there's a lot of things that people don't know that they can do for free that an attorney is going to charge them for. And there's really no need for it because the attorney should tell them, look, you don't need to pay me for this. You can do this thing for free. Here's how you do it. Now, some of them may want to pay you anyways because they don't want to do it. They don't want to do that part of it. And that's okay. She goes, but I think a lot of times they think that it has to be done through an attorney. She's like, when it doesn't. And so
I agree. Business registrations, the best example I can give everybody. I have five or six businesses here now. Some of them are personal, some of them are joint ventures and so on. The reality is that the lawyer, for example, your business registration, which is due in the month of March, April, depending on the businesses, the reality is that the lawyers are probably going to charge you $200 or $300 as a spread, which they're going to put in their pocket. You get done the exact same thing by your accountant, it's probably going to cost you $50.
Right. Yeah.
So I agree. I totally agree. And it goes both ways. I mean, you're going to get the amazing people and you're going to get people that, they just want to make $1 and make the short-term gain. And It is what it is.
Right. And I think a lot of that is we don't know what we don't know, right? So we just come in and we just trust that we should do it this way because we don't. And, another thing that she told me that I didn't know, and I don't know why I didn't know it, but she said that any contract that you sign in Costa Rica should always be presented to you in your language.
Yeah. I've done many, many, many contracts. The reality is that whatever language you want, if I speak German, my colleague speaks German, and then we both sign a contract in German, that's fine. The issue is when you're going to have, if something goes south, and you have to go to court, then you have to get it translated by a registered translator and blah, 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 blah. But the reality is that what are the odds of it happening? Probably slim. And if you get to that point, worst case, pay the $200, $300, $400 it's going to cost you to get it translated versus getting a contract done in English and Spanish, as an example, by your lawyer is probably going to cost you $1,000, $1,500 just to get a proper done contract. When sometimes, whatever you're signing on a napkin still works here. So it is what it is, right?
Absolutely. So let's go back to your wife and your family right now. So how old are your kids right now?
5, 7, and 8. I got three young boys.
And so now they are multilingual and they love life in Costa Rica.
Yeah. Now it's a little slower because it's the summertime, so now they can't wait for their friends to be back and going back to school and everything else. But I mean, it's a different mindset. You can't have the same mindset. Is there things that we miss, from when we were in Canada, or people that we know here that miss things from the States and so on? Of course, just like anybody else. The accessibility, certain parks. It was always nice to go with the kids. The parks that we have here in our area, they're not necessarily super nice, or they're in the plain sun where, when it's 35 degrees outside Celsius, it's darn hot. So we don't really go to the park when that comes around. And the beach, there's only so many times you can go to the beach during a week. So many days in a row, you can go to the beach during the same week. So the reality is it's a different mindset. I mean, the freedom, the way that the kids think, the way that they develop as well, the way that they connect, not just with themselves. I mean, whether they're siblings or with friends, but I mean, with the earth as well. My youngest, he used to go to daycare. He was 2.5 years old, and he went to daycare, and it was a Spanish-speaking daycare, and it was very basic. But I mean, his nickname was Mowgli, and I mean, from there on, he's little Tarzan. He's climbing up trees. He's shoeless. The rocks are like 150 degrees, and he's still walking on there barefoot, and he doesn't feel the heat. So it brings a whole different type of reality. And then we go back to Canada, and it's like, no, buddy, put a shirt on. What are you doing?
That's funny. And so do you ever envision a time whenever you're like, okay, well, we've done this thing. Let's move back to Canada?
Canada, no. I mean, for us, the base of operation is definitely here. I mean, regardless if it's going to be for the next 2 years and the next 50 years, we don't know. You never know at the end of the day. But for us, this is definitely the place. It's more of being able to live something a little different, once or twice a year. So whether we go back to Canada just for a visit during the summertime or during high season, maybe Christmas time. I know that my wife and myself, we were discussing maybe going to see some friends in Paris, for example.
Oh, nice.
So it's being able to move around, which is not necessarily the reality for everybody. I get it. But it also, I really think it all starts in the head, right? I mean, if you're here and you're starting where, you know what, I need my restaurants, I need my Amazon, I need my deliveries, I need, then you know what, you probably need to go back. I mean, that's the reality.
Well, I think it's a difference between like a consumer mentality, right? So, like, I think if people who are considering the move, right, to Costa Rica, if for the year before they're even considering the move, they would take themselves out of the consumer mentality, right? Every time you go to buy something, you'd be like, do I need this? Am I taking it to Costa Rica? Like, am I just solving an urge for right now? Because like, it's almost like quitting smoking. Like whenever I smoked for a long time, when I quit smoking like 30 years ago, I would literally just tell them every time I'd want a cigarette, I'd go, why do you want a cigarette? You don't smoke. Oh yeah, I forgot. Right. That would be the conversation I had with myself. And so the conversation that we have now is like, when we get ready to purchase something, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And I go, hang on a second. I'm not a consumer. And I have that dialogue with myself and go, oh yeah, I forgot. Because I'll be like, I'm not taking that with me. And so once you start thinking like that, I think it helps you to wean yourself off of that immediate gratification of buying the thing all the time, the newest dang thing or whatever that we don't need anyways. And like you said, how much of that stuff that you brought with you did you need? Like whether it was clothes or whether it was stuff, how many things in those 32 totes does she probably going to end up needing? You need a lot less whenever you come down to a place that's so simple.
And I had a conversation with a friend not long ago, and the reality is that Costa Rica digs you bare. I don't know if that's the right expression, but I mean, it brings you to the core of who you are. Like being in the jungle, that's what it does to you. And for the good, the bad, the ugly, everything's going to come out. So whether you want to admit it to yourself or not, you don't have to, because you will have, you might not want to, but you will have to, because it's going to smack you right in the face.
Right.
Regardless of what it is, whether it's the consumerism, whether it's the fast pace, everything, the phones and the North Americans were all like, oh my gosh, we always need to be over stimulated for everything and anything and all the time. So when you come here and then life slows down, it's like, oh my gosh, this is way too slow. No, it's not because it's too slow. It's because technically we're getting bombarded 24/7 in North America for things that, like you just mentioned, Robin, we don't even need.
Right. And we get addicted to the chaos.
Yeah.
Right. And so going
it's a drug.
And
it's
going into that vacuum is just like someone sucked your soul out of you, right? And it's like, you're like, where is the chaos? Where's the stuff? And it takes you a while to detox from the chaos. And if some people can never do that thing, right? So they need to, I think, before they make that move, they need to come down and dedicate like at least a month. For a month, I'm going to come down and see, can I live this for a month?
Yeah, a good month for sure. And then some people, regardless of where in the country you want to settle down, the reality is, come down for 6 months and then go a month in different regions and then go across the country. And once you've seen different ecosystem, different vibes, different types of people, different fauna and flora, different
temperatures.
There you go. That's what I was looking for. Think the temperatures as well. I mean, there's regions that are much rainier than the others, and so on and so forth. And the pace of things, I tell this to everybody all the time. In Costa Rica, there's 3 speeds. It's slow, slower, and slowest. So somebody tells you fast, it's a red flag in my book. Run away. Yeah. So that's why you have to adapt. And you're going to go to the bank, and you're going to have the abuelita. So you're going to have the grandma that's going to be sitting there, and it's her social for the day, and she's going to talk for 2 hours with the people around. And if you take the time to stop and realize it instead of being frustrated about it, you realize it's actually really nice. The human connection that's there, it's amazing. But we're all, oh my gosh, I got to hurry up and I got to go and fast. So what happens is that, you just end up getting frustrated about everything and anything.
One of the things that we discovered, and everybody that comes there will discover, that Tico time is a real thing. And mañana does not mean tomorrow. It just means not today.
The reality is mañana is later. If you have that later, regardless of when that is, it's later. So.
Yeah. Do not think it's tomorrow. It is not tomorrow. It is never tomorrow.
So true.
And it has to be okay. And I think probably the ranging feeling that I get from everybody that I talk to, that they're like, what did you think about, what was the hardest thing about Costa Rica? And every one of them was like, the banking. The banking is like the most difficult thing I've ever experienced in my life. And we have such ease of banking in North America that it's kind of difficult for us to imagine, like we do everything mobilely. Like I haven't been inside of a bank and I can't even tell you how long in the States. Like I bank at Wells Fargo and there's not even one in my state. And I bank with them because I used to work for them. And so I've just had that account forever. And like, I can do everything mobilely. I don't have to worry about it. And so whenever we set up our bank account in Costa Rica, I'm not kidding you, I just sent my husband to go get lunch. We were there so long that I was like, we had gotten to a whole other meal set that we needed. We needed food to sustain us to get this transaction done of opening our bank account. But, and once you get one set up, man, take care of that thing because you don't want to have to go through that again. Pick the right bank first and then take care of that bank account.
It's getting easier and easier, to be honest. I mean, if I go 3 years ago when I moved here, it took me 6 hours in 3 different instances to open up a bank account. Whereas right now, I opened up a bank account. I think in total it took me 2 days, but it's just because it was virtually done. Everything was done pretty online. So I mean, it's getting better and better. Is it going to be great? It'll never be great. I mean, the banking system here is very archaic, and to put things in perspective, in Canada and the States, we're used to saying, these banks, they're slow, there's this, there's that, etc. And I have a lot of friends in the banking space in Canada, but in the States, it's the same thing, where the infrastructure is so big and so heavy that by the time technology-wise, they finish what needs to be done, and then they get it and they implement it. In reality, they're still 5 years behind. Mm-hmm. And that's every time. But why? Because the infrastructure is so big. Right. Hence the reason that all these neobanks is because they piggyback off of existing banks, the Wise, the Revolut, the Cohos of this world, and so on and so forth. The reality is why those ones are striving like crazy is because, they're all digital. Mm-hmm. So, well, most of them anyways, not all of them, but most of them. And
they're swift and nimble, right? So it's funny, whenever I was in the mortgage space, like during the mortgage meltdown, so like in the 2007, 2008 time, I was in the middle of all of that insanity. And I worked for Wells Fargo, and my friend worked for Countrywide, right? Doesn't exist anymore, but she was always trying to recruit me to come to work for Countrywide. She's like, you guys are like that big old ship. Like it just like plugs along and nothing. But she goes, you know what? We're the speedboat. We got all of these tools and we have these Nina loans and all of these loans, right? These no income, no asset. We call them liar loans. We have all of this stuff and Wells Fargo doesn't offer that. And she's like, you really should come to work here. And I didn't. And then when everything collapsed and Wells Fargo was one of the bigs that was still left standing. And I'm like, I think I sunk your battleship. I'm not sure because they were out of business so fast. I mean, Countrywide was. And I think that now as we see the banking reform has happened, and you're right, that nimble and speediness of banking and being able to facilitate whatever you can digitally is like where everybody wants to be. And so I don't want to walk into a bank. Now, my business partner, she wants to walk in and have a relationship with the bank. I don't care. I don't care if they know who I am when I come through the drive-through. I don't care. Like, I just want to do a transaction. I don't want to be your friend and I don't want to go to lunch. Like, let's just get this done. And she's like, oh, I stopped in and talked to Brian the other day and blah, blah. Like, who cares? But we're two different kinds of consumers, right? We're two different kinds of people who do banking. She wants a relationship with the bank and I just want the transaction.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, that's the beauty of having the mixture of both. You have brick and mortar stores, and then you have the online digital aspect. And, whether we want to admit it or not, with the AI generation coming up and the I don't know what gen we're at anymore. WVZ, whatever. I mean, the reality is, most of them don't even want to talk to anybody. My sister's 32 and she goes into like yourself, she'd never, ever talk to anybody in the banks. She just, everything's digital. For me, I don't mind. It's either or, depending on, I prefer not to, but here in Costa Rica, the thing is you don't want to, but you have to.
Understood. Well, I'm going to let you get back to your day. You have given me so much good information to give our people. I do want you to give me all of the links that we need. I'm going to drop them in the show notes before, after the show, and to your development, to your lending company, to all of the things, so people have access to all of your resources. And I know we didn't touch on it, but I know your wife is in the marketing space. That's what she got to do coming down here, is move into the marketing space for Facebook and Instagram in that world of empowerment. And I love that she's found a place to thrive also. And for everybody who's watching, if you'll remember to subscribe, smash that subscribe button, download, do all of the things that you need to do to make this successful, but also share this episode with somebody who has been asking questions about relocating to Costa Rica. And there's so much good information in here that I didn't know before I talked to Gabriel. So I know if I didn't know it, and I've been playing in the Costa Rica world for over 10 years, that a lot of people didn't know it as well. So I think maybe there's some hindrance, some people coming down to buy property because they think they have to pay cash for it, that there is no options for them, and or that it's so arduous they don't want to go through it. So I think connecting with Gabriel and his people will be very valuable for you guys, and be able to facilitate getting maybe the property that you didn't think you could have, but now you can. So Gabriel, thank you again. I appreciate your time so much. So much. And I can't wait to meet you face to face. We'll be down there soon. I'm always in OHL. You can always catch me sometime at Citrus. Having some
classics.
Seeing having some of the world's greatest creme brulee.
There you go.
And a good steak. So as we tell everybody when we sign up here, have a great day, and pura vida.
Pura vida. Thank you.